60 million people with at least one vaccine dose in the U.S. and around 2 million more getting shots every day, nearly 3 million yesterday. The CDC released long-awaited guidance today as to what people should and should not be doing once they're fully vaccinated. According to the guidelines, 2 weeks after getting a final shot, fully vaccinated people can visit with other fully vaccinated people indoors without wearing masks or distancing. They can also safely visit indoors with a single household of unvaccinated people who are at low risk from COVID-19. But beyond those exceptions, regular masking and distancing guidelines still apply. And the CDC still discourages unnecessary travel for everyone, whether you're vaccinated or not.
While we work to quickly vaccinate people more and more each day, we have to see this through. Let's stick together. Please keep wearing a well-fitting mask and taking the other public health actions we know work to help stop the spread of this virus.
Still far from life as we knew it a year ago, but it's a major step towards post-pandemic life and welcome news for many who will be able to visit with family for the first time in a long time. The announcement also comes on the heels of welcome news for some of the millions struggling from the financial impacts of the pandemic as well. The Senate, well, actually more precisely, Democrats in the Senate, passed their version of Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill over the weekend, which the House is expected to sign off on and send to the president's desk tomorrow. When it's passed, the package is expected to lift millions out of poverty, in part through $1,400 stimulus checks, which could start going out within days of Biden's signature, extended unemployment benefits, and more. The bill would also expand the child tax credit, boost federal health insurance subsidies, among other forms of aid. I'm joined now by Chuck Collins. Chuck is the director of the program on inequality and the common good at the progressive think tank, the Institute for Policy Studies. It's been a long time, Chuck. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Jim.
So I am among those who is describing this as one of the most significant anti-poverty initiatives in decades. Is that hyperbole or is it accurate?
No, it really is probably the most substantial anti-poverty legislation in a generation or two. It's kind of an FDR, National Recovery Act scale intervention, I think. So I think you're right. I think it's big.
So it's big for those in poverty across the board. Does it do anything to address the wealth and income gap between Black and white Americans, Latino Americans and white Americans, or no?
I think it will indirectly do that. It has a bunch of things that really address people in deep poverty. The child tax credit, the earned income credit are both refundable in this case, so it's reaching below the sort of lowest income thresholds in the past. The stimulus checks will obviously reach people in the emergency moment, but there's a bunch of things that I think will, like the support for not just the very poor, but sort of working poor and even middle class are going to have some benefit here in terms of the benefits that are being put in this legislation.
Refundable meaning the term used, even if you pay nothing in taxes, you still get a check or some sort of payment. A bunch of people who actually supported the general direction of this bill thought that some of it was not as targeted as it should have been and didn't help poor and low and moderate income people as much as some other provisions. Generally at the top of that were the stimulus checks. A number of economists with whom I spoke, progressive economists, thought the unemployment thing is perfect and targeted. The stimulus checks for far too many people were going to the, quote, whatever this means, wrong people. Do you agree with that analysis or no?
I think part of what we're doing right now is showing that government can do big things to make a difference for a lot of people that are hurting right now. And that includes, not just the very poor, but there are a lot of low income and working class households that are also, affected here. So I think this is not a time really to nickel and dime and quibble. This is a time for a big infusion. It'll have a positive economic stimulus through the whole economy. And it's not giving away to the billionaires. We know the billionaires are doing fine and the top 10%, 20% are doing fine during this pandemic. But it is, and particularly those refundable tax credits, those really do reach people who are in the deepest levels of poverty in our society. going to lift,
How much more would it-
45% of
Sorry.
children. 45% of children who are in poverty will be lifted above the poverty line.
That is stunning. Just stunning.
Yeah.
How much more would a minimum wage hike from 7.25 to 15 gradually, admittedly, how much more of a difference would that have made? Obviously didn't make it into the final bill.
It would help. It would have a bump up effect, on the 12, 13 million people who would get that pay increase. And it would also have that positive bottom up stimulus effect on the economy, just more money in the pockets of working people. I think we focused a lot on the fact that it's not part of the stimulus bill. But the more I look at it, the more there are really interesting things in there. There's a pension backup for underfunded pension funds that'll help 1 million blue collar workers who are not sure they're going to be able to retire. There's money for rural broadband, which is a huge issue in rural areas. Again, thinking about FDR, this is like the rural electrification program for rural communities that need to be reintegrated into the economy. So the more we learn about what's in here, I think the more we'll see. It's a far-reaching bill that will have a really positive. And you can understand, after a decade of Mitch McConnell and sort of blocking any kind of meaningful social legislation for the last decade, to be able to put forward a bill that actually moves a bunch of things that have been blocked for years really will make a huge difference in people's lives.
What do you say, back on the minimum wage for a second? I was stunned to see among those who voted no on the minimum wage hike were two senators whose residents are watching this show, Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan. Their minimum wage is the federal minimum wage in their state, a whopping $7.25. Yet again, they voted no with all the Republicans and 6 or 7 other Democrats and 1 independent. What do you say to them?
Well, I think that they're going to be hearing a lot from their constituents. I mean, raising the minimum wage, this is part of the Democratic platform. This is central to what Democrats have been talking about. It's one of the key ways we're going to address these extreme inequalities. I understand Maggie Hassan is looking over her shoulder at John Sununu, who's vetoed a $12 minimum wage in New Hampshire over the last several terms and thinking he's going to be her challenger. But I don't think the answer is backing away. The answer is going forward. The minimum wage is a no-brainer. It's just so common sense at this point, and it's phased in over so much time, it's not going to have any down impact on the economy.
Chuck Collins, economics was never my strong suit. And I'm sure that a lot of viewers are saying, tell us something we don't know. But one of the things I do remember from Economics 101 is when you give money and benefits to low-income people, they'll spend it. They're not going to save it, particularly after a situation like this. So in terms of jump-starting the economy, beyond being humane to people who need it most, in terms of jump-starting the economy, these were the exact right decisions, I assume.
Absolutely. I mean, the stimulus checks, if the minimum wage would increase, that is money that, low and middle income people spend money in the local economy. You give a tax break to the super rich, it can go anywhere on the planet, and it can go into speculative investments. But targeted income support. Another component of this bill is state and local aid, $350 billion going to states and localities. That will benefit anyone who lives in a state or locality. I mean, it will have such a broad, positive, again, economic benefit. 1.4 trillion or 1.4 million people lost their jobs in state and local government. And this will help not just the short term, but it will help the next couple of years in recovery.
I want to talk about the next couple of years. Richie Neal, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, was on a radio show a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him if his hope was to make the increase in the child tax credit, where people with kids under 6 get a check of $300 a month, potentially. Did he want to make it permanent? He said yes. Ed Markey was with us on the radio on Friday, said he hoped he would make these income supplements permanent as well, sort of a universal basic income thing. Let's assume they both fail, that the child tax credit increase is for the term of the pandemic this year. The stimulus payments are the last of their kind. What happens to those who were lifted out of poverty as a result of this package when the package disappears?
Well, I mean, I think and some of these expire as early as September. Then we go off a cliff. We go back to poverty rates going up again for millions of people and millions of children. So I think, again, it's a very common sense thing. We need to sort of rebuild a decency floor. We've seen what's happened to essential workers, the most vulnerable people in our economy. This is the moment to lift millions of people upward.
Well, that's my last question about whether America's ready for it. Everybody talks about how this was a partisan bill, which it was in the legislature. It was not a partisan bill in terms of the public. It was a bipartisan measure. Let me just show you some numbers from this Monmouth University poll from a few days ago. Do you support the $1.9 trillion plan? 62% yes. Increased unemployment benefits, 67%. And then let's go down to, do you think the $1,400 stimulus check, the combination of should be larger or is just right, is 81%. 81%. Quickly, Chuck, if you can. Are these numbers a function of the pandemic squeeze, or are they a function of a changing America in your estimation?
That support existed prior to the pandemic for a lot of the proposals we're talking about. So I think even Republicans and independents are weighing in and saying, we need to reduce these extreme inequalities, and this is the moment we're in. This is the crisis that has made this possible. But I think there is a political opinion shift when it comes to some of these things that lift up the floor and reduce inequality.
Chuck Collins, it's good to see you. Thanks for your work. Thanks for your time. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.